What does being part of a guild mean to you?
Oh, it's part of my heart. It means everything to me. Absolutely everything. Good friends, sharing, caring. I know that's corny, but it's true. And that really is what has gotten me through the pandemic, are the people in the guilds. Everything else is busy work and good, but the people, that's what being a member of the guild means.
Hello and welcome to the New York Guild of Handweavers Member Spotlight. My name is Katie Clemens and I am the membership chair of the Guild. With almost 200 members, the New York Guild of Handweavers provides inspiration, information, and mutual support to anyone interested in weaving, tapestry, spinning, or fiber arts through speakers, workshops, as well as our lending library. Go to nyhandweavers.org for more information. Today, we will talk with New York Guild member Kate Ohara. Kate's path is as winding, textured, and colorful as her beautiful weavings. At the age of 8, she began her craft and entrepreneurial path by making and selling potholders. At 18, while living in a convent, she started knitting. She found she wasn't a fan of patterns. After 6 years in the convent, she moved on to become a nurse and worked at a VA hospital for 29 years. Her creative work has been varied, ranging from stained glass work, Kumihimo braiding, knitted scarves, papermaking, and weaving, and through the years has sold her work at craft shows. In 2020, her fiber passion was ignited. While her current weaving is done on a small scale, it packs a big punch, as you'll see. A teacher as well as a crafter, Kate has taught classes how to photograph your jewelry, how to set up an Etsy shop, how to Zoom step by step. Her goal during COVID has been to focus on learning Zoom and coordinating online events to unite the fiber community. She's currently working on an interactive map of all the fiber guilds across the US. She's been a member of the New York Guild for just about a year. Still a member of the Philly Guild, Kate loves her New York Guild. So welcome, Kate Ohara.
Thank you, Katie. It's good to be here.
You started making potholders as a child. Do you have any memory of the potholders or your experience of selling them?
Absolutely. My friend Judy and I were about 7, 8 years old, and she had the potholder looms, and we would make the potholders out of very poor quality nylon loops. And we would go around the neighborhood and sell them for 25 cents each. Every sweet mother or woman who opened the door bought one. How kind of them. And we know they never used them because they would have burned their hands.
You mentioned a story in your early knitting days about making 2 sweaters in 2 years. I want to hear about that and the whole context of that.
Oh, yes. When I was a nun, and for 2 years we were in training, and we were in silence all day, and we had an hour and a half at night for recreation, and we were all given knitting projects. And I sat next to an 80-year-old Scottish nun who nobody could understand, but I could. And she taught me how to knit. And the first thing was with, get this, mohair. And it had a raglan sleeve. And I would sit next to her and knit and knit. And after about a week, in her very Scottish accent, she said, "Sister, have you held your knitting up yet?" And I said, "No." She said, "Hold it up." The sleeve was about 3.5 feet long. we did a lot of ripping. It was the size of a jacket. My mother used to wear it to hang out the laundry.
Oh.
And my second sweater, I got much smarter, was wool. It was a vest with a V-neck, the least amount of knitting I would have to do. And my father wore that for years. Oh. But I learned I did not like patterns.
So I wanted to start a slideshow here. Here starts some craft pictures. Tell us about the stained glass.
Yes, I love flying a kite as a child and an adult. And I was in a friend's glass studio, and she did fused glass, and she had scraps sitting around. And I just put them in the form of a kite. And I proceeded to put them in my pocket without telling her. And I went home and with, solder and copper foil, made my first stained glass kite. And that was the beginning of quite an adventure. And I was always worried because I have an essential tremor, and the outline of my mobiles, my kites, is very textured. And most people do perfect seams with their solder. And I discovered Alexander Calder, whose work was off the charts, and nothing was even in his work. So I felt I could go forward. So I did my mobiles until it was no longer safe for me to solder with hot solder because my tremor got worse.
What would you say to someone who finds starts to have a physical limitation in their crafting? What kind of advice do you have for them?
I would tell them, you can work through any limitation. It's just a matter of finding what you love and doing it. And in some cases, safety enters. I don't use sharp tools and I don't use hot solder anymore, but I can weave and I can braid. And it's a matter of searching and finding what you like to do and accepting what you do and loving it.
So the next Kumihimo braiding, this looks great. Tell me about this.
Okay, these actually were post Kumihimo. These were done on a Mirex loom. And my family in Brooklyn and Seattle, Washington, we all got together and went to Washington for the Women's March. And you will notice the multi-generational hands. And I am not in this picture because I was not able to march. I was down the street volunteering somewhere. But I made a total of about 20 bracelets because people's friends wanted them. And I said to them, what do you want the bracelet to look like? And unanimously, they said a rainbow. So that's what we did. And these were my last bracelets.
I'm curious, these clasps. What are these clasps?
The clasps are very important. I, in my bracelet history, made clasps that came apart, fell apart. Those are the strongest magnetic clasps known to God and man. So they did not come apart.
They look like a very safe closure.
They really, really are. And if anyone needs to know about a magnetic clasp, please contact me.
You mentioned you had a Sayori scarf that you knit, a Sayori scarf you had in quotes, you knit in 2012. And how did that influence your path?
Well, I had all this extra yarn and I needed a wool scarf. So I knitted it and I actually went out and bought more because I doubled it. It was the most expensive scarf I ever made. And it was a wild scarf. So I wore it to the guild and I had sworn I would never weave because I did not like patterns. And everybody at the guild wove patterns. So I wore my scarf in and one of the members said, that is very Sayori. And I said, what is Sayori? She said, Google it. I did. There is a Sayori studio in Philadelphia. I immediately signed up because there are no patterns and went and took classes for 8 or 9 months. And I love working on the floor loom. I love the rhythm between the feet and the hands, throwing the shuttle. And then it came time to warp the loom. And with my tremor, I could not do it. And I was heartbroken. I went back to the guild and I said, what am I to do? And they said, you're going to get a rigid heddle loom. And that was what I've been weaving on ever since.
Wow. Another question I have, how did you balance your nursing work with your creative endeavors?
I thought back on that.
Mhm.
I had energy to burn. I don't know how I did it. The last 15 years of nursing, which is when I began weaving, luckily I worked Monday through Friday and a day shift. I could never have done it if I was rotating and working weekends. So I had weekends, and in the summer I had evenings. I can't do fiber art in artificial light. I need sunlight.
Mhm.
And I've heard a lot of people say that it's hard to do.
Mhm.
So with all this energy, I did the craft shows, I worked, I did the weaving, the stained glass. I was a single parent, and it just all worked. And the weaving and fiber art and stained glass helped keep my mental health balance because my work was very intense. And I had an ID badge, and every day I took it off, I hung it on a hook, and that symbolically I left work on the hook. And then I went into my other creative endeavors.
You mentioned Pam Paul.
Oh, Pam Paul saw my bracelets, and she said, and she had her weaving studio in my friend's glass studio building.
Now, before, who is Pam Paul?
Oh, Pam Paul, oh my gosh. Pam Paul is weaver extraordinaire. She was a member of the Philadelphia Guild of Handweavers for decades and then moved to Florida. And she developed a workshop called The Path. And she offered 2 at the Guild, and I never took it because I was not a weaver. I was not confident at all. But when I first met Pam, she saw my bracelets and said, you can join the Guild of Handweavers. I said, no, I can't. So I joined the Guild, and it was about 9 months later that I heard about Sayuri and started weaving.
Boy, she was the connector then.
She was the connector, my mentor, my friend.
Yeah. The workshop you she taught over Zoom in 2019 was The Path.
It
workshop.
was The Path. It was at the end of 2019. We had Path 1. It was every week for 6 weeks. And the idea was to find your own voice, your own creativity. And we all went out and took pictures of whatever we wanted. And then we wove them. And we wove something every single week for 5 weeks. I forgot to eat. I forgot to sleep. It was so exciting. And I never wove another scarf ever. I just went on this creative adventure. Then she offered Path 2, and then she offered Path 3. So of course I took all 3.
You started selling potholders as a kid, and you went on to sell your stained glass work, the Kumihimo bracelets, and the knitted scarves at craft shows. What was your experience of selling work at craft shows?
My stained glass mobiles were great fun to sell because I loved them. The scarves and the bracelets, I followed all the trends, read all the fashion magazines, the color schemes, the whole 9 yards. So I made the scarves and bracelets to sell. It was not an endeavor of love like my mobiles were. And once the craft show stopped, I had no desire to make any more scarves. And luckily the Path came along. But I love selling. I love interacting with the customers. And it was amazing whether they bought a mobile or a scarf, it always matched what they were wearing that day.
Oh, that's funny. Wow. I guess they found their color.
They found their color. The nice thing about the mobiles is they would hang inside and out. So they
Oh,
could be in the snow, the rain, they could be out all year long
wow.
because I made them very solidly. I soldered them to death, all the connections.
And now your paper, you make paper too.
Yes,
How'd you get into that and what's that process like?
I don't remember what got me into paper. There was someone at the guild making paper, and
Mhm.
she mentioned a paper class, so I went.
Mhm.
And I absolutely fell in love with making paper.
Wow.
And there was a start and a stop to that. And I put it aside and I had all my paper. And that was the end of paper for quite a while. And then it resurrected again.
So let's jump to 2020. Your fiber arts got ignited during, your fiber passion got ignited during lockdown.
Lockdown was very difficult for me. I live alone with my dog and cat. And the lockdown isolation was incredible for me. That's when I really started working on Zoom. And I thought, what did we do at the Guild? So I started arranging for Zoom meetings, the monthly meetings. We had a portable fibers group every Tuesday that we went to in person. I turned that into Zoom. We had showed 2 movies in person. Then the shutdown came, so we started having movies every month and eventually coordinated with the New York Guild. And then I said, let's do show and tells. Let's see what we're doing. So that really, the Zoom saved my life because I have to keep busy. And the fiber art weaving gave me a reason to get up in the morning and kept my mental health going because I am in a very high risk. So I could have gotten very lost in all the negatives of COVID. And I decided early on, I just planned my life around staying alive, being healthy mentally and physically, and fiber arts and the guilds got me through without a doubt, and my guild friends.
Mhm. Let's share some of these images of what you did. Let's hear about this piece.
Yeah, this, when I went to the Sayori studio,
Mhm.
the first class was a 4-hour class. The loom was warped, and I was told I would show how to work the petals in the Sayori loom. There are only 2, and how to throw the shuttle and how to wind it. And I was allowed to go around and pick out whatever fiber I wanted and weave it. And this is what I did in 4 hours. And Leslie, the instructor, said, the reason you were so free to do this is because you've never had a weaving class, you've never had a pattern in weaving. So this is totally freehand, very Sayori.
Well, Zen mind, beginner mind. Yeah,
Yeah,
there's something great about going in with a clean slate.
yes. And I have this hanging right next to me. I look at every day. And then I took the 4-month class, which was once again working on patterns on a warp loom. And then I took another 4-month class where you went from warping, winding the warp, and threading. It took me about 12 hours to thread the heddles with my tremor.
The floor.
And I was persistent, but I knew I would never be able to do it again. But the mentality and the spirit of the free weaving, of course, stayed with me.
And so then how long was it before you started working on a rigid heddle?
Right after I spent 12 hours trying to thread the heddles on the Sayori loom, I went and got 1 rigid heddle, then 2, then 3, and you know how it goes. How that goes.
Say no more.
Yeah.
So you had all your rigid heddle looms before 2020?
Yeah, just around, yes, I did. Actually, I did, yes.
That's that was
I
fortunate.
was ready.
Yeah, because of all the supply and all that kind of stuff. So let's keep, so this is in a series, isolation, this is called Life in the Cracks 1. Oh, talk more about this piece.
Okay, there are two, and I call them the dumpster series. What do people do during lockdown? I went to the dumpster a lot. And one day I just looked down and I said, look at all the growth coming out of the cracks. So I took pictures. And what I thought was significant was all the people during COVID, either economically, physically, mental health wise, were caught in the cracks of society. And this was just asphalt, and this just grew up. And I said, this is very hopeful. So I called this Life in the Cracks 1. And that piece is about 5 inches by 4 inches.
Okay, good to know the dimension.
I weave everything small. I don't have time for big things.
There's a lot to be said for that.
Mm-hmm.
And this was what I was talking about, packs a punch. Now another, there we go.
This is Life in the Cracks 2. And there was a fence by the dumpster and this green stuff growing up around the dumpster. So I wove this, Life in the Cracks 2.
Boy, I love the use of that eyelash yarn.
Oh, and this was all hand painted with Cicada. It's a transparent paint, and I use it to paint my yarn a lot. It really looks good.
So then what color is the eyelash yarn starting out with?
The eyelash yarn was sort of, I want to say it was white.
Wow.
And the warp is 10-1 linen, which after taking a transparency class, I fell in love with 10-1 linen and probably use it in 90% of all of my weaving.
Wow, it really comes together so beautifully. More life.
This one is called Resilience. The lower gray part is meant to show the sidewalk. And as I walked along the sidewalk every day, these beautiful, beautiful flowers were there, the purple flowers. And every day, because it was close to the sidewalk, they would get trampled down and die. And 3 days later, they were right back up again. So it's all around the COVID response, how people are resilient and can get through it. Now, the purple is Devore, which I absolutely loved. Devore is a silk velvet that has chemicals are used to burn it out. It's Devore. It's a very beautiful fiber. It's not actually yarn, it's probably more of a fiber, but it fit very well. You see the eyelash yarn again.
Yeah.
And then I had some other novelty yarn and I painted it all with the Cicada to get the different colors of green.
So effective. That's great, Kate. Let's see, we'll go to the next one. Okay, and other in the isolation series.
This is the hero tree. And I read a book, The Life of Trees, which talked about how everybody thinks trees edge each other out. In reality, they share roots. They give, light and shade to each other. And a friend of mine took a picture of this tree out in Arizona somewhere. And this tree was dying. And this is probably my most emotional piece. Even though it's dying, it has growth, it has fungal growth, it has insects, birds were nesting in it. And even in the last stages of its life, it was still being a hero and offering some type of sustainability to other things. And the fungus on this is natural sponges that I painted with Bengala mud dye. And
Trying to
I
see
just
them.
used different yarn I had. I think I painted the green,
Mhm.
and that's a hero tree.
Mm.
And all the little off color are to represent the insects that are living in there.
Mm. Beautiful. Oh,
And this one, it's called Calm. I think we all remember the anxiety over getting our first COVID vaccination, how you couldn't get it, how the waiting lines were long, and I finally got it. And I went home and I wove this piece in 24 hours
oh.
because I just felt at peace.
Mhm.
And I picked very neutral yarn, and the inlays are Hanji paper, which is a Japanese paper. And I tea dyed it. I painted it with Bengala mud dye, just very calming colors.
Mm.
And that is my post-vaccination piece. So yes, weaving definitely got me through COVID
And beyond.
and beyond.
Yeah.
Now,
Desert Reflections. Let's hear about this.
the third path class was on sound. And during lockdown, I fell in love with the American native flute. And I decided I was going to do a desert scene, and it was going to have this beautiful sunset and desert sands, and it was going to be gorgeous. And then Gigi Matthews from the New York Guild told me about the Navajo churro sheep that both in the 1850s and I think the 1940s was almost made extinct by government intervention. So I decided to weave reflections of the desert to the sound of the music, but dedicating it to the Navajo churro sheep. So the natural spun fiber you see in there, Gigi did, and I did a lot of painting of the fiber, and there's some eyelash yarn in there. And I put a Picasso piece of jasper in to represent the flute. And you'll see brown paper coming out of both ends, and that is painted with Bengala dye. So I wanted it to be very earthy and reflect the life of the churro sheep in the desert.
Let's see. Oh, Cicada. Let's hear about this one.
This is a cicada. Remember, I don't like patterns. I don't like counting. This was actually, I'm showing it vertically, but it was woven horizontally.
Okay.
And the colorful inlays were meant to show the different levels of the sound of the cicada. I wove this, and we all remember when the cicadas were at their height. So I said, I have to weave the cicada. So I went looking for a cicada stamp, and I found a very colorful one. They're very colorful right after they hatch. So I took the stamp, I blew it up, and I printed it on my handmade paper. And Molly Elkind, in one of her classes, showed how she put something in a pouch.
Oh.
Well, she had a multi-shaft loom. I did not. So
good point.
I wove up, and I had to count and count and count. And the top and bottom is woven up to the space.
Okay.
And then I slipped the stamp at the last minute into the slot where there is no warp, or
Wow.
it's on top of the warp.
Yeah.
There's no weft, I guess. I have to look at it sideways.
Right.
And then I proceeded to weave the other side.
Whoa.
It was painful. And when I finished it, I certainly appreciate what I did.
Mhm.
But when I finished it, I showed it to a friend and she said, "Oh, I love it." And I said, "Oh, will you take it?"
That's great.
It has
Aw.
found a home where it is loved deeply. So
Aw.
once again, I learned I don't like to count. I don't like patterns. And this is very patterned, even though I didn't plan it that way.
Did you have flashbacks of the sweater, the mohair sweater with the 3.5 foot?
Oh, I did. I had flashbacks of everything. And I had this incredible multicolored yarn that I was able to use that picked up all the coloring in the Cicada stamp. So it really did work out very, very well.
Great, another great piece. Wow. So what's next here? Oh, talk about this one.
Oh, well, this one was emotional too. When Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, I was heartbroken. So I just sat down and I wove this. And the way I visualized it is Ruth Bader Ginsburg sitting on a bench looking at this. It is a waterfall. There are trees to the left, the blue sky, and the white and the blue are the water coming down. And it was very rewarding to do this. I absolutely adore it.
A lot of emotion in there. I love it.
Yes,
Oh, magic in the koi pond. Let's see.
magic in the koi pond. And I should have included 2 pictures, but I only included 1. I wove this. I was tired of sound after the cicadas. I needed a break.
And how much sound do koi fish make?
They don't. So I wove this, and actually, this was the underside of the piece.
Huh.
And the right side of the piece was very neat, very orderly. And what you see is the underside where everything was pulled through. And when I looked at the neat, orderly side, I said, there is nothing magical about this. It's boring. And I turned it over and I said, there is the magic. So that's how this piece came to be. It is inlay of roving. That's what the orange is. Different color novelty yarn that I pulled through. And I believe the green and blue is sock yarn variegated.
Wow.
And whatever yarn I had that fit the feeling I used. And once again, it's 10-1 linen, which I love working with.
Let's see, this is titled, oops, I can't see.
This is
Oh, yeah.
Reflections.
Tell me more about this title.
Okay, this
and
is
it's-
humorous. When we first had lockdown, I said, I have to get out, but nobody was allowed out. There were no cars on the road. And I love coffee, and I used to go to Dunkin' Donuts once in a while. And I said, well, let me see what happens. Dunkin' Donuts is about 6 blocks away. Nobody was on the road. I get to Dunkin' Donuts, and there are 4 police cars in line. And I said, Dunkin' Donuts must be essential.
Yeah.
I went to Dunkin' Donuts every day for 2 years. I budgeted my money. I wasn't spending any.
Yeah.
I took the dog, and it was my social life.
Yeah.
And when I parked, there was a greenhouse place, and the reflection of Dunkin' Donuts was in the plastic. So I took the picture of the reflection, and this is what I would see every day parking there. So it is the reflection of Dunkin' Donuts behind me.
It's never complete without hearing the story behind.
That's right.
Seeing a piece is never complete. Oh yeah, tell me about this one.
Remember the Ruth Bader Ginsburg?
Mhm.
I had some warp left on, which is the 10-1 white linen. And I said, oh, let me weave something. I'm going to paint it. I'm going to dye it. I'm going to do all sorts of stuff. And I started doing inlays of white. And I said, oh my goodness, this is Serenity. It's about 2 inches by 4 inches. And I just finished it off and that was it. And I adore this piece. I forget who I just saw, and she said, I love starting and never knowing what it's going to look like when I'm done. Patricia Mal Arche is actually who just said that. And that's how I feel about my weaving, to be surprised.
Well, and there's describe the feeling then when it is completed.
I said, wow, and to think I was going to ruin this.
Let's see. Oh, I remember that. Let's hear more about this one. This is called Words of Hope.
Words of Hope. One of the movie nights was Textiles and Tea. Oh no, not Textiles and Tea. Textile Magicians. And they had 4 Japanese weavers, and I didn't get a chance to go back and get her name. But she did very long 5, 6, 7 foot weavings. And she would take paper and put Japanese symbols on them, cut it up, and use it as the weft. So what I did was I took regular hanji, white hanji paper, and I put words of hope, faith, hope, encouragement, love. And then I cut up the paper and I wet it and I rolled it up and I inlaid it into the weaving, leaving the ends out. And that's Words of Hope. And once again, this is the wrong side.
And yet,
yeah, when I finished it, it just looked so bland, and I turned it over and I would have cut all those off so they wouldn't show. And I said, but this is the piece right here.
Yeah.
So you never know. Yeah, someone said, listen to your fiber, and I try to follow that and not fight it.
Right. Be guided by it. Let's see. Okay. Now this is a postage stamp series, so we'll start with Amelia Earhart. Let's hear.
Yeah, I have a friend in Brooklyn, and I said to her, what stamp would you like? And she said, I'll let you know in a couple days. And she said, Amelia Earhart. So I found the stamp. I got them on eBay. I had it sent to me. And of course, it's sort of a reddish pink because she's a woman. And I tried to work with the reddish pink and it didn't fit her. So I just started thinking about the interesting life she had, how bold she was. And I believe that might be hand woven my paper in the back. And I tea stained it and rust dyed it and put bengawa and anything I could to just give it some life. And I had this snippet. I went through all my snippets, and this snippet just looks so strong and powerful. So that's what I put the stamp on.
I love that.
Snippets are great fun.
Huh.
And I do a lot of sampling. And when I want to do something like this, I find what I like and I just snip it at both ends and boom, there it is.
It's funny.
And I will tell you how this all started. I had a stamp and I was using cardboard and I didn't know what to put behind it. And the cat is always in my studio. and dragged out one of my snippets and dumped it on the living room floor. And that's what went behind that stamp.
This
And from-
Amelia Earhart one?
No, this is
different.
another stamp.
Oh, we may
And
have a
from
picture.
then on, I used fiber behind my stamps. When we get to the cat one, I'll tell you, it's obvious.
Oh, right.
A little chewed on. Here is another. Brooklyn is a great theme.
Yeah.
This is the Brooklyn Bridge. The paper I handmade and hand painted both sheets of paper. I wanted to celebrate the cables. And I think I mentioned this at Show and Tell at New York. I was a little worried that all the cables were sort of shattered. And in a moment of panic, I said, oh, the Brooklyn Bridge is not going to fall down if you do this. It's okay. So I finished the stamp. I love the way the cables go up. The bridge did not fall down. And this is living in Brooklyn also.
And what are these fibers?
That is all part of the same snippet.
Okay.
And that is the warp.
Okay.
So what I did was I just pulled out weft until I was happy with how it looked.
Love it. Love it. Okay.
And this is the one the cat chewed.
Is she credited in your?
Yeah, I should credit her.
Yeah.
Yes. The backing, once again, is my handmade paper.
Mm.
And my sister is a gardener, and I wanted to make something special for her. So I went on eBay and found a beautiful gardening stamp. And I used this snippet, which I've used in other ones. I'm very fond of it. It seems to fit a lot. So that is the gardening postage stamp art.
How did you get those colors in that sample, in that piece behind the stamp?
Oh, I think I painted them on.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah, I painted them on to match the stamp.
Okay, let's see. Oh, love
this one.
That's here.
This also is in Brooklyn. When I saw this Gandhi stamp, I knew exactly who I was going to give it to, and that was Gigi Matthews in Brooklyn. And the upper yarns in this were hand spun by Gigi. And once again, it's a snippet. And it's on a tea bag. And I let the tea bag sit, and I also put the tea bag, I put rust on top. So it's both tea and rust stained. And I think this just came out remarkably well.
I agree.
And I was so lucky to have this snippet that matched it so perfectly.
Let's see what's next. Okay. This is called Marianne.
Marianne, and I have a friend who just loves everything French. So when I saw this stamp, I said, all right. So I put it on 2 pieces of my paper, put a snippet behind it, which you recognize. I just love that snippet.
Mhm.
Did a little coloring of the snippet, and that is Marianne.
Beautiful. Let's see. Oh no, we've got oh, this is still in the postage stamp.
Yes, this was the very first one I did. We had a challenge winter to summer, and I saw the one of the bird and I said, let me make a nest. So I used the snippet, which I'd used in another piece, probably Words of Hope. And I put the stamp on, framed it, and that did very well for winter, summer.
Okay, and this is titled Gathering Totem Outside Lines.
Yes, this
That's
is my paper series, which I did about 2 weeks ago.
Oh.
And my goal was to make one sheet of paper for my friend Gail, and I made it too thin. And the only way I could get it off the plastic was to use a metal spatula. And all of a sudden, I had made a pile of what I had taken off. And I said, this is downright artistic. So I started working with the paper. So
Great.
the upper left is a gathering, and they are just things I picked up on walks, mixed them in with the paper pulp, and formed that particular shape. The long one on the right, I call the totem because it's layered. It's hard to see the three-dimensional part of it. That one is actually about 8 inches tall.
Wow.
And that has a lot of gatherings from the garden. Oh, what I put in the in with the paper pulp, I put indigo, liquid indigo to get the blue. And this was the lighter blue, and then you'll see the darker. And the one on the lower left, that shows those scrapings, those very thin scrapings I did. And with Loctite glue, which puts 1 drop of glue down, it was hard, but I was able. There are probably about 15 pieces of paper layered in that.
Wow. Let's see what's next.
And this was another one I did with the scrapings off the plastic. This one probably has a good 45 to 50 layers in it. Wow. And it is just fun to look at.
Yeah.
Now, these were the darker indigo. And once again, I scraped up the paper. And this time, the paper was slightly wet and it sort of formed cups. So I just sort of layered them. And then if you go back to the long shot, going closer, there we are. I had one piece, that's all one piece off a plan of mine, a vine. And I just put that right smack in the middle, and that's called a shooting star. And then the one to the left, I called together. I just sort of blended the dark indigo with the light indigo, very simplistic. And I thought I was done with paper, but I picked up a piece of bark, and I think I'm going to do a series with paper and bark.
Oh,
that's what I'm going to do next.
To seeing that. Now, speaking of what you're doing next, tell us about this.
Well, HGA invited me to be on the panel for collaboration and partnership. And Gigi and I did Zoom and partnerships. And from that, I thought how nice it would be if everybody knew what other guilds were in the country. And it just came to me. So I started on the West Coast. And every guild, when you click on it, you get a picture of their logo, you get their contact information, their webpage, their Facebook, whatever. And I actually visit every one of these guilds. I visit their webpage, and I've actually contacted some people and become friends. And it's an adventure. What people are doing across the country, it is just such an adventure. So I'm up to Texas. It'll probably take me another 2 months to finish. And then I'll find the venue. I want to get it out to as many venues as possible. And people can just take a journey.
That's a great tool. In fact, we could put a link when it's done in the notes or the description of this video.
Yes.
So people can access that. What a great tool.
And this is going to keep me busy for a very long time. And it's important that I stay busy.
Yeah. Well, and you've got your coffee to
And I have my
fuel
coffee.
fuel you. Couple other questions before. Do you have a motto for what you're for using color in your work?
Oh, well, just a little background. I do not find color intuitive.
Hmm.
About 10 years ago, I took a color theory course.
Mhm.
It was 4 weeks long, 3 hours each night. We had a 30-minute break. And it was so stressful, I would go out to the car and cry for 30 minutes, pull myself together, go back in. I finished the course, I finished the book, but the one thing I learned was how to use the color wheel. And what I do is, and to the right of me, you see a wall filled with things. I cut things out of magazines. I take pictures off, Pinterest, the web, and I have things all over to inspire me, especially color, because once again, it is not intuitive. So I search for good color combinations.
What would you tell, another question, what would you tell a fiber artist or any crafter who feels stuck or uninspired?
I would tell them to look around. Look at your environment like I did for the path. Go out, take pictures, see what catches your eye, hang things around your studio, clip things out of magazines, and just look at them. And I guarantee you something will come up. And it doesn't always have to be weaving. I went into paper, I went into postage stamps. I have a little hello loom that is 2.5 inches by 5 inches. And I make these little weavings. And sometimes you just need a total break and then you go back.
Tell me about movie night.
Well, movie night started after COVID, of course. We had 2 movies in person, and we thought, why don't we try to Zoom them? So 2 years ago, we started with movies, and we have kept the names of the movies and the links, which the New York Guild now has and is on the webpage. And we showed movies every month. And then we were showing a movie to New York and a movie to Philadelphia. And we said, well, let's do them together. So we now do the New York, Philadelphia movies once a month.
And that is on the second Saturday of the month at 7 p.m.
At 7 p.m., yes.
Runs about an hour. It's a great group of people to discuss afterwards, a little discussion afterwards. Well, I have a question. Any one video or featured artist that sticks out in your mind?
Well, yes, of course, Sheila Hicks, who is my soulmate. She doesn't know it. My mentor, she doesn't know it. But I love her whole philosophy of weaving. She would carry a loom around that was 4 inches by 4 inches and just do these amazing little weavings, which are part of museum collections today. She doesn't care about selvages. She doesn't care about patterns. Close to my heart.
Well, let's do one more question. What does being part of a guild mean to you?
Oh, it's part of my heart. And you're going to get me to cry at the end.
I don't have a tissue to.
It is.
You're making me teary.
The people, it means everything to me. Absolutely everything. Good friends, sharing, caring. I know that's corny, but it's true. And that really is what has gotten me through the pandemic, are the people in the guilds. Everything else is busy work and good, but the people, that's what being a member of the guild means.
Well, thank you so much, Kate. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you, Katie.
And thank you for watching. If you like the video, please like, comment, and share, and subscribe to the NYGH YouTube channel. If you're interested in joining the New York Handweavers Guild, please go to nyhandweavers.org. Again, thanks for watching. And in the words of Madeline Vanderhoot, happy weaving. Bye-bye.